Hi, I'm Dino Tripodis, and tonight on Whiskey Business, I visit an old friend, Scotch whiskey on Whiskey Business. Hi, I'm Dino Tripodis, and welcome to Whiskey Business, the podcast not so much about whiskey as it is one with whiskey. Welcome, my friends, to another remote podcast, which I'm sure you're going to love. And before we get into it, I would like to do a brief history of my imbibing. Sure, in high school, I had the 3-2 beers. We would cross over the bridge to West Virginia, where you only had to be 18 to drink liquor and so forth. And we experimented with the 7-7s. That was the classic high school drink. In college, I graduated to something a tad more sophisticated. I was a gin drinker. One, because everybody hated gin, so nobody drank your gin. And two, my girlfriend at the time liked gin as well. So we came together over gin. Then one summer where I was gainfully employed trying to make money for the next quarter at the Ohio State University, the gentleman I worked for said, I will buy you drinks after we're done working every night, but you got to drink what I drink. And he drank Scotch whiskey, a blended one, Chivas Regal. I mentioned it Chivas Regal because it will come full circle when I tell you that who and what we've got going on tonight on the podcast. And then I was a Scotch drinker until bourbon and rye came into my life. Jack Daniel's Sour Mash whiskey came into my life with my affinity and affection for Frank Sinatra. And I kind of fell off the path. I still would drink Scotch from time to time, but not as religiously as I would the bourbons and the ryes. And I was a big fan of rye, and I said that ryes would start to make a comeback, and they did. And now Scotch, which has been there for the masses and the loyal year after year, decade after decade, hasn't gone anywhere. But now it's starting to make a bit of a comeback as well. Maybe, dare I say, maybe we're bourbon tired. Probably not. Are we rye exhausted? Doubtful. But maybe it's time to get Scotch worthy once again. And once again, let me say hi, I'm Dino Tripodis, and welcome to Whiskey Business, the podcast not so much about whiskey, which I cannot do without the capable talents. Who's coming on first, John Whitney? You or Hansberry? John Whitney.
Hansberry froze, and he hasn't gotten back on yet.
Okay, so John Whitney on the video side of things as we are broadcasting remotely with our guest who is in Ohio and doing some virtual tastings in Ohio until Hansberry frees himself up and does all the business that we need to do. Let's not waste any time and talk with the national ambassador for Aberlour Single Malt Scotch whiskey. Gemma Cole is with us. Hi, Gemma. How are you?
Hi.
There you are.
Thank you.
Nice to have you on the podcast. And thank you to you and Alyssa. You know, I've always had a dream as an adult man that someday I wouldn't have to leave my house to go get whiskey. And sure enough, when we were communicating back and forth with Alyssa and we finally settled on a time and a date, she said, we'll send you some product. And I can't tell you as a middle-aged man how happy I was to see 3 incredible bottles of single malt Scotch whiskey come be delivered to my home. It's like
awesome.
That's you know, the hell with Uber Eats and anything else that it brings food. This is the ultimate. So thank you so much for being with us. You are the national brand ambassador, correct?
I am.
Yes. And as a national brand ambassador, which we've spoken with brand ambassadors before, would you like to tell us what exactly your job entails? Because it seems like it's varied from ambassador to ambassador. So
yeah, it definitely does. The industry is quite diverse, actually, when it comes to what your roles are. And obviously, in the current climate, things have changed a lot. So up until March, I would say, my role was to travel a lot. I was traveling 2 to 3 weeks out of the month. Every month I was traveling from, so I'm based in California, but my role is national. So I would go California all the way to New York, Texas, everywhere in between.
And how often are you on the road as an ambassador? I know with the current conditions being the way they are, obviously this is the road for you right now, but under normal circumstances, how often would you be?
It would have been 2 or 3 weeks a month.
Yeah.
So it would have been like Monday to Friday for a week, say in Florida, and then the next week I would be in Texas for Monday to Friday, and the following week I could be somewhere else.
Okay. And the accent?
Never really a whole month, which is good. I always made it home within the month, thankfully.
Within the month. But California, it might be your residence, but it's not your home. The accent is
Irish.
Irish, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's where you were born?
That's where I was born and raised.
And raised. And when did you come to the States?
Almost. It's coming up on 10 years. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Wow.
You still there's you might even know him. It's on the Irish whiskey side of things. Another Irish fellow by the name of Martin Kennedy was on our show.
Oh, really?
For Tullamore whiskeys, and Irish as well. And I asked him the same thing: is the longer he stays in the States, does the accent go away? I know I have Greek relatives who been in this country for 50 years, and their accent is just as strong as it's ever been. But have any of the American affectations snuck in there and stolen it? Because it's a lovely accent.
Thank you. It's I would say enunciation is the thing that changes, not really so much the accent, but slowing down your speech and enunciating and using, regional words that we wouldn't particularly use
in Ireland.
Sometimes I get caught out when I go home. I'll say something that I haven't realized is termed as an American word.
Right.
And I'll not even realize that I've said it because I'm so used to being here, But anytime I go home and I come back again, people always tell me that my accent is a lot stronger when I came back.
Okay, it's interesting. It's interesting. Well, thank you for being with us, and we're going to try 3 different brands of Scotch whiskey tonight, which Johnny and I have had the pleasure of having a little sneak peek the night before. And the reason I did the sneak peek, and I mentioned this in the opening, is that we were excited to have Scotch whiskey on the show because it's been a long time. These bottles will be our 146th, 7th, and 148th bottle of whiskey on the podcast. That's the only running theme on Whiskey Business, is that we introduce a different bottle, and sometimes we have more than one bottle on the podcast, but that's the only running thing, that we have a different bottle that we share with our guests. And it's been a long, long time since we've had any whiskey or Scotch whiskey.
A lot of boozing, Dino.
It's a lot of bottles. It's a lot of bottles.
A lot of
but we obviously, with the bourbon explosion that occurred in the last decade, and then the return of rye whiskeys, there have been a lot of bourbons and ryes. But as I keep a watchful eye, I've seen that those who sometimes were confirmed Scotch drinkers that switched over to bourbon, and some of the dedicated Scotch drinkers, I've seen Scotch take its rightful claim back in the spirit world. And I know that Aberlour has been working extremely hard to raise their profile as well in the Scotch world by putting out some incredible things, award-winning spirits in the last couple of years. And we have 3 of those with us tonight that we're very excited to try. So shall we?
Yes. Shall we?
Shall we?
I noticed that you've started pouring your little sample.
I just poured the one, yeah.
We're starting with the, for those of you who are listening and not watching, we are starting with the Aberlour 12-year double cask matured single malt Scotch whiskey. Explain the double cask, because it comes from it's well, just like I said, it's been double cast. You might want to go ahead and explain that.
That's something that's really, really important to us at Aberlour. It's really important that people understand what that means, because I think with Scotch whiskey, and it's something that as you say, the trend is kind of coming back around towards Scotch whiskey again. Companies are realizing that they have to be more transparent with their customers. So we want to put as much information on the bottles as possible in order to make your kind of shopping experience a little bit easier. Double cask maturation falls into the wood category, right? So you'll see double cask, double woods, triple woods, three kinds of influence. You see all this different terminology around Scotch whiskey, and it can be really confusing. What does it actually mean? So with double cask maturation, with the Aberlour 12 year that you're about to drink, or re-drink, I should say, what we actually do is we take our new mix spirit. So we can't call it whiskey until it's been aged for a minimum of 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
After the 3 years, we're allowed to legally call it whiskey. So we refer to that as the new mix spirit, the high proof liquid that comes straight off the still. We put a portion of that into ex bourbon barrels, and another portion of it goes into ex Oloroso sherry barrels. And those two barrels don't actually touch each other. They rest at the distillery. They kind of hang out, go to sleep for a minimum of 12 years. And only after those 12 years, we take a portion of each of those barrels, those fully matured 12-year-old whiskeys, and we marry them together.
That's like the longest courtship ever.
Exactly. And that's why we marry them.
Yeah.
Where do you get your bourbon barrels? Where do you get your bourbon barrels from?
We get them from a lot of different places. It's not just one single place. So don't want to give anyone kind of what's the right word for that?
Favoritism?
Exactly.
No favoritism? No favoritism.
We get it from multiple places, and the reason for that is because Aberlour is a part of a bigger family, and as a family we purchased barrels. So we're not just purchasing directly for Aberlour, we're purchasing for lots of other distilleries in Scotland.
Which brings me to when I said in the opening that I would come full circle when that first exploration into Scotch was Chevis Regal, and the company, I believe, is owned by the Chevis brothers. So look at me, I've come full circle and back into the Chevis family one way or another.
You're like
from those humble beginnings, from those humble beginnings in Clarksburg, West Virginia, to my own home. Here I go.
That's crazy that was the first whiskey. It's not actually crazy, but it's fun that was the first whiskey, Scotch whiskey, that you tried.
It was, and I drank it all summer long. I mean, that's the only, it was only till in my mid-20s where I started to, I thought that Chevis Regal was the end all be all, and then someone said, have you tried a single malt Scotch? I go to, what? And then I discovered single malts and started to explore that world a little bit more.
There's a lot of debate around the single malt versus blended whiskey, and I think Chevis Regal is a perfect example of a really, really incredible blended Scotch whiskey. I think it's a perfect example to show people the complexity of blended whiskeys versus single malt whiskeys. They're obviously very different from each other. Chevis is
while we're getting ready to try the Hansberry, you missed out on what we're trying first. The first one is the 12 year that we're trying. Okay, you got it. Okay,
cheers.
We're trying the first one. Let's take a little sip of this, and while we're discussing the complexities of this wonderful 12 year, also dig into a little bit of history about the distillery itself, which was started quite a time ago. But we're going to take our first little sip. Well, first of all, and okay, what I tell you yesterday, Johnny, as far as the nose, I thought it had a very fruity nose
Yep.
right out of the gate.
Definitely. Sweet.
Which is, and I don't want to spoil it for the other two bottles, but I believe in this particular trio, I was impressed with how much fruit came from all of them in some manner. They're all very 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 fragrant. One more than the other, but this one,
it's delicious. So the fruitiness is something that comes through a lot on this particular whiskey. It's a Speyside single malt. So Speyside in general is known for having sweeter, fruitier kind of malt forward whiskeys, if you will. They're just really easy drinking, I would say. Speyside whiskies in general tend to be quite honey forward.
a lot of
Hold on, I'm sorry. What do you say? What space age? I don't know.
Space. No, not space age.
Speyside.
Explain it to me. Explain it to me.
Speyside. So Speyside, actually, only one of you has the actual bottles in front of you.
Yes.
So I'll show you, those of you that are actually watching the screen, if you see the label, it says Speyside Single Malt.
Got it.
Right.
SPEYSIDE. Got it.
ID, right.
Okay.
So if you see that on a bottle, it means that it's from a particular region in Scotland.
Oh,
which is
gotcha.
the Speyside region. So if you think of champagne having to come from the Champagne region, and like 3 steps outside of that particular region, you can't use the word champagne, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Speyside is the same. It's a particular designated region in Scotland, but it's actually within the Highlands of Scotland. So we are Highland single malt, but we are more specifically a Speyside single malt. And Speyside gets its name from the River Spey that runs right through that particular distilling region.
Got it.
It's actually the most densely populated distilling region in the whole world.
There's a friction between the two areas. Do they butt heads all the time?
No.
No.
Scottish people in general are just really lovely, and they like the distilling region. It's so dense. There's so many distilleries, but they're all really respectful of each other. Probably because family members are working at different distilleries. You know, the mom will work at one, the dad will be somewhere else, the son will be working at a different distillery.
I didn't know if it was San Francisco Oakland rivalry. I didn't know.
And Hansberry, didn't you send me a text earlier today saying I got to do some Scotch homework?
You see how far I got?
Yeah. You did it. You know, okay. This is a distillery on the Speyside side of things, started by Mr. James Fleming way back in 1870. I want to say 1879, if I remember my notes correctly.
Yes, 10 points.
Okay, and 10 points. After he had already been working in the field for 10 years prior to that, decided to strike out on his own. And I always maybe it was the times, but he died by today's terms as a relatively young man. He was only like 65 years old when he died, and I'm, that's not too far from where I'm at right now. Like I can't imagine enjoying and making whiskey and talking about whiskey and then croaking 3 years from now. That would be horrible. But he started a good thing.
Yeah, he did, and he did a lot in his life, actually, considering that he did die at quite a young age. Before he founded Aberlour Distillery, he was a master distiller at another distillery. Before that, he was a barley merchant, and before that, he was a barley farmer. So he actually kind of grew up in the world of whiskey making, which a lot of people did in the Highlands of Scotland at that time. And he kind of honed his skills over the years and decided he wanted to make his own whiskey. And off the back of the success of his own distillery, he gave money back into the community, the Aberlour community. So it wasn't like, I'm going to make loads of whiskey, I'm going to make loads of money, and I'm going to have a great life. He was a very humble man, actually, and wanted to make great whiskey to make great whiskey and to give people, show people a good time, but also in order to help the community of Aberlour. So very kind of philanthropic man.
Well, he started a good thing, and obviously they've continued on. It's had a few different ownerships through the centuries and the years, but where they're at right now, it seems like you guys are on track. When I talk to uninitiated Scotch drinkers, they always say, "Oh no, I don't want to try Scotch because I don't like the smoke. It's too peaty. It's too smoky." This first one, and like I said, I don't want to spoil the rest of them. This first one, to me, is more oaky than smoky. And I don't mean to be cute and rhyme, but that's how it feels. It's
a shirt that says that.
There's a more hint of oak than there would be any smoke. And like I said, we sampled these a little bit last night because we didn't want to be completely uninitiated again, moving back into Scotch. But I think I told Johnny last night, this 12-year, which by the way is also very reasonably priced.
Yeah,
as far as retail, would be a wonderful bottle to introduce to somebody who was wanting to step into the single malt Scotch world. I would highly recommend this as a step into that journey of single malts.
It's got cute little little wheels on the side, like training wheels.
I would. Hey, it's a 12-year, and okay, maybe the training wheels. It is 80 proof, I believe. 80 proof. Maybe those are training wheels because the ones we're getting into go up a little higher in proof. But this is delightful. Is there anything else you want to tell us about
Scotch?
A breakfast Scotch. It's got a really nice finish too, I might add.
Yeah, it's delicious, and like you said, it's perfect for people that want to get into the world of single malt or Scotch whiskey that might be a little bit intimidated because it has kind of been set up as an intimidating category for so many years, and
why do you think that is?
Through those boundaries, I'm not sure. I think we set it up initially as being like the older the better. It's really refined, and you have to be a certain type of person to be able to access this whiskey. And now we're like, you know what? We want everybody and anybody of legal drinking age to be able to appreciate Aberlour and actually the whole Scotch whiskey industry in general. We want to make it more accessible to people. We don't like them to be afraid or scared off. So training wheels is not the word that I would use, but it is definitely a great kind of introductory whiskey to people that either are not whiskey drinkers or they maybe came from American whiskey or Irish whiskey or a different kind of style of whiskey, and they want to get into the world of Scotch whiskey, but they've heard that Scotch whiskey is smoky. And I would say that's probably the biggest misconception in the world of Scotch whiskey. Avalor is completely non-peated. We don't use any peat whatsoever in any of our whiskeys. So no matter which one you choose, you'll be safe if you don't like smoky whiskeys.
Yeah, I think once again, I feel like I'm spoiling the next two bottles that are coming up when I say this, but I'm not. I'm saying the bridge that you guys have sent to us this evening, and I call it a bridge. This would be a most excellent bridge to cross over if you were an American whiskey drinker, if you were a hardcore bourbon drinker, if you enjoyed the nose and the palates of certain bourbons that have certain a fruity nose, and you can taste certain spices, and you're going to get that same type of enjoyment and that same type of result in these whiskeys that we're trying, starting with this first one that we just did and moving forward as well. So this is an excellent bridge, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are as to why why all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but does everything in your opinion, does it go in circles, in cycles?
Cyclical.
There
Yeah.
was a time where bourbon was off to the side and nobody gave a damn about it. It was all about the, the ice cream vodkas and the tutti
Took the words
fruttis.
out of my
Yeah,
mouth.
yeah, right. It was all about that. And then all of a sudden, boom.
And it wasn't that long ago. It was
No.
not that long ago that every bar you went to and every liquor store was packed from floor to ceiling with marshmallow vodka and all this crazy stuff. And every vodka brand had 27, 57 different
Yes.
flavors. And then all of a sudden, the consumer palate changed again, and it was like, you know what, we're gonna cut back to the bring it back from like 50 expressions of vodka to maybe like 5.
Right.
People started drinking
Mm-hmm.
brown spirits again. It is cyclical. It's always cyclical. So it's never like whiskey it's never going to go away. It just
Thank God.
have
Thank God for small favors.
yeah, exactly. So we will get times where other spirits will be kind of in vogue, if you will, and so like mezcal's having a moment at the moment as well.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Has
True.
been for quite a while as well, which I think is wonderful because it's opening people up into all these different kind of flavor profiles that they would never experience with other spirits, and it's amazing. And through that, people are more willing to try other things. So I think we're getting more curious as consumers. We're becoming much more curious. We're kind of pulling away from mainstream and wanting to try things that are a little bit different from, mass marketed big companies.
And then when you're talking about like this first one we just tried, you're talking, this I can't say that that Avalor would capitalize on the fact that Scotch whiskey has made a comeback because this is 12 years old. This was a birthing, in the making 12 years ago when. So they weren't Nostradamus. They weren't saying in 2020 and 2019 Scotch is going to start making a comeback. So we're going to start right now and make something really special.
The only thing they got right about 2020. Jeez.
What's that? What's that?
The Scotch is the only thing right about 2020. I have a question. Is it sacrilegious? The craft cocktail trend is booming right now. I've always seen a couple of Scotch cocktails on menus, and those are like some of the kind of more unique, creative cocktails. Is it sacrilegious to make, say, like an old fashioned with Scotch? Or I mean, what are the kind of do's and don'ts or the trends in using it as an ingredient as a part of a craft cocktail?
That's a really good question. There are no rules around drinking your whiskey. We have recommendations how we like to describe drinking your whiskey if you're new to that whiskey. If it's something that you've tried before, you can play around till your heart's content with it. Scotch whiskey, typically single malt scotches, generally are not used for cocktails, and that's basically going back to price. So bars want to make money. If you're using a single malt in your cocktail, you're either going to have to raise the price of your cocktail or you're going to have to take a hit off your bottom line with that one. So you will see more blended scotches, but even blended scotches are going to be a little bit pricier too than, say, a younger American whiskey, So that's typically the reason why people don't use.
Less about the flavor profile.
Yeah. Exactly. If money wasn't an object, and for certain bars and restaurants, it's not, you will see single malt Scotch cocktails on their menu because the flavors are delicious and that they make amazing cocktails, very, very rich, intense cocktails. But you will see people play with it. They'll do a little spritz of maybe like a peated single malt, a spritz on top, so you get that kind of lovely Scotch, smoky Scotch essence, but they'll use a blended whiskey in the actual cocktail to keep their costs where they need them to be. So If you're at home, it's a totally different story because it's your whiskey. It's
your whiskey. It's your house, Hansberry. You do what you want.
That's right.
You want to mix it
My
with
party,
Kool-Aid?
do what I
Go
want.
ahead. You go ahead.
Hey, don't knock the Kool-Aid. Don't knock the Kool-Aid.
But don't tell me that. Hey, you know that Scotch we had? I mixed it with Kool-Aid. Don't tell me that. I'll get very upset.
You can do whatever you want with it as long as you enjoy
Kool-Aid.
it. That's the number one rule.
Did we mention the approximate retail price of the 12-year? Did we say what it goes for? Is it? Am I right? Where it's right around the $39-40 value, or is that incorrect? I've seen it for $39. I've seen it for $39.50.
That is definitely on the low end.
Yeah,
I saw that. You have to forgive me because I am national, so I don't have every
varies.
State is going to be different. Yeah, exactly. So some states are obviously a lot more expensive than others. I would typically say it's going to be more in around the 60-65%.
So wherever I found this price point, $39.50 was very, very low.
You need to go back.
I need to go back.
Yeah, go back. Though.
Okay, because it's even at $60, it's still.
Yeah, it's a 12-year-old single malt.
It's a 12-year-old. I thought $39.50 was like, wow, really? That was
that must be like a deal that they've got going on wherever you saw that.
Maybe.
Looking online, I see one for 57. I see one for 44. So
they do vary, and you're right. From state to state, Ohio is a control
52.
state, so we don't have the luxury of extorting people and raising our prices to whatever we choose to in some states, and some states can do that. So I mean, we sell it for what the distillery suggests that it should sell for, and it stays that way, which that's a whole nother topic entirely about Ohio being a control state. I like the fact that it's a controlled state. Some other people don't because they say it limits the products that come into our state, but that's all bullshit as far as I'm concerned. And that's been on previous podcasts. We won't get into it with you, but it just flares up in my head from time to time. Let's move on, shall we? Which one are we trying next?
So you just had the 12-year.
Yeah.
You've two more to taste. So the next one is actually called A'Bunadh Alba, and it's our newest expression. We've had it for just over a year. Yet, if anyone is watching, you'll be able to see the lovely light color of this. I'm going to show you the bottle.
Much lighter. The
first thing that we noticed yesterday when when Johnny and I were tasting how much lighter this was in color, A'Bunadh.
Sunshine in a bottle.
Of the A'Bunadh, meaning of the origin.
Of
correct?
the origin.
Of the origin.
Named after Jessica Alba.
Yeah,
yes,
right. No.
Exactly. We named it after her. Alba is Scots Gaelic for Scotland, so it means Scotland, but it's also a little bit of a play on words. So it's referencing Quercus Alba, which is Latin for white oak, and white American oak is what we actually age this whiskey in. So it's little play on words.
Nice.
Bourbon barrels.
This is whiskey that is solely aged in ex-bourbon barrels, American oak casks. So the previous one, the 12-year that you tasted, is American oak cask, ex-bourbon barrel, and also European oak casks, ex-sherry barrels together. This one is just ex-bourbon barrels, American oak. So you can see the huge color difference with this.
Yeah.
If you've got it in your glass, have a little nose of it and see what the difference is. It's crazy different from the last. Actually, all three are totally different from each other.
I mentioned this. Yes, this is where I was yesterday, and here's where I am today. When I went with the nose on this one, it didn't overpower me with anything in particular, and I thought that as a result of not being able to pick up anything really strong up front in the nose, that I was going to embark on something that I didn't necessarily care for. Boy, was I wrong.
I
Boy,
know.
was I wrong. After I sipped,
It's very misleading, this particular whiskey.
and so very smooth.
Mhm.
And then I start to, on the palate, I mean, we talked earlier about um, how many fruit offerings there seem to be in this particular line of scotches. And I'm getting hit with everything from chocolate to spices to fruit to just it's this would be the best way I can describe if I had a magnificent steak dinner with all the trimmings and I was stuffed and I wanted a dessert scotch, which I do enjoy a nice whiskey after a big meal. This one right here would be like the ultimate dessert scotch whiskey for me because of all the flavors that are in here. I mean, I picked up on chocolate and raisins and spices and so many other different things. And also I picked up a little bit up front. Let me. Yeah, up front, a little tobacco, which I kind of like. A little tobacco.
Yeah, that's super subtle in this one though, but it's definitely there. The thing with this one that you need to remember that we haven't talked about is that this is actually a cask strength whiskey.
Mhm.
So going into it, we're jumping from 40% ABV or 80 proof up to, now you need to tell me if you're on batch number 1 or batch number 2.
I am on batch number 2, I believe.
So my batch is batch number 1, and this is at 57.1%.
We beat you.
Yours is it 58.6?
Yeah.
58.7, actually.
58.7. So yours is a little bit higher alcohol content than mine.
Right.
Your flavor profile is also going to be slightly different from mine.
A little bit.
They're batched. We don't do anything to this whiskey, so we don't remove anything from it. We don't add anything to it. It's coming directly from the cask into the bottle, then into your glass. But what I would recommend with this particular whiskey, because it's a cask strength, after you've tasted it and you've given it, and I've watched you have a few sips of it, give it a few sips and then add a couple of drops of water to it.
Drops.
It's really going to change the texture of the whiskey. It's going to open up the flavors that you wouldn't necessarily get when it's a cask strength. And you've got your little water droppers.
I do. I have one. How many drops? Like a couple?
For me is the texture. The texture changes. It becomes much creamier on the palate when you add water to it.
And
off this
which also adds which complements what I said about it does become creamier and I don't want to say cake like, but it is like almost cake in a glass on some level.
It's very sweet. It's nice.
I get a lot of apricots off this one, peaches and apricots. Also get a little bit of mint, so it goes back to like you're saying it like it's a end of dinner kind of dessert style whiskey. I would say like it's a kind of single malt scotch that you can drink in the middle of summer on a hot day, which is, you can't say that about a lot of scotch.
True.
Whiskeys,
yeah.
But you could enjoy this in the summertime.
Peaches. That's what I was looking for last night, Dino, because I couldn't quite get there.
Peaches?
When you say peaches, yeah, you're right. It's very good.
It's delicious.
It is delicious. No age statement on
no
this.
Age statement and award winning with no age statement.
Right.
We released this whiskey last year, 2019. Whiskey Advocate actually did their top 20 whiskeys of 2019, and we got number 5. So we were the 5th best whiskey of 2019 according to the Whiskey Advocate.
Nice.
And we'd literally just released about a month previous to that, so that was a big kind of win for us. Non-age statements, you'll probably have noticed, are becoming a lot more prevalent than they used to be. And again, it's because of that, trying to move away from the elitist mentality that surrounded Scotch whiskey for a long time, and trying to bring more people into the fold and allow people to experience things that they wouldn't necessarily go for before. I think when you put a number on something, you prejudge it. Just like you prejudge the color of this whiskey. You think
I did.
you're going to get one thing, and when you taste it, you get something completely different.
I did, because I didn't get everything that I would I in the nose right up front. Kind of gives you like a sneak peek as to what you might be tasting on your palate and the roof of mouth, and then the finish at the end. But it's like, no, there's no spoilers here. Go ahead, sip, and then you'll see what it's all about. And I did. It's wonderful. The no age statement, though, I mean, that's interesting, because some people, you mentioned to pull away from the non-elitist. Don't some people take some pride in the fact that this is a 20-year, this is a 25-year, this is a 30-year-old Scotch, and you should be blessed that it's in your glass and you're drinking it, you heathen.
Then you never can find it. Because everybody wants it, right?
You can't find it. You can't afford it.
Right.
Only a certain group of people that can afford to drink 30-year-old whiskies.
So this is 30 years.
No,
time and a place.
that's not 30 years.
So you can drink. Of course, we have age statements as well. The first whiskey that we tried was an age statement, and it's perfect. But we want to give people the option. So we also want to show people that it's not just about age. The older doesn't necessarily mean the better. The more expensive doesn't mean that it's going to be your favorite whiskey. And in order to kind of break through those boundaries, we need people to explore the category and taste things without prejudging. So if someone gives you a whiskey and says, this is a Speyside Single Malt, it's 25 years old and it's been aged in an Oloroso sherry cask. If someone gave me that whiskey, I would go, bing, 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 I know what this should taste like.
Okay.
Because you've given me all this information. This is what I expect this whiskey to taste like. And I may very well be disappointed because it hasn't met my criteria of what you've told me that it should be. I have an image in my mind of what that should taste like. When you don't have an age statement, you're automatically taking that away and saying, you know what, just try it.
Just try it.
So the fun is in the exploration of the product, basically, right?
Exactly. And it's
Always.
the craftsmanship behind whiskey making doesn't necessarily have to be restricted by a number, because with the Scotch whiskey, the youngest drop of liquid has to be the number that goes on the front of the bottle. So if we put a single drop of 3-year-old whiskey in a 25-year-old, everything else is 25 in the bottle, and we put a single drop of 3-year-old in there, it would have to say 3 on the label. So it's very restrictive in what we can do playing around with the whiskey, so that's another reason we want people to explore it without judging too much.
No. Let me ask you before we get to our third one. What do you enjoy when the day is done and you're kicking back, or is it completely? Do you just step away from the spirit world entirely? But when you're looking to kick back, is there a favorite? Maybe it's one of these three, or maybe it's something else in the family that you enjoy sitting back with and imbibing in.
It definitely depends on the mood. So the 12-year would be the one that I drink the most of. But for me, the 12 is kind of anytime. I shouldn't say all day or every day drinking, because responsible drinking. But if it is my kind of everyday kind of drink.
These days I'll do, a year ago, if you would have said I drink all day, people would have said you have a problem. But given the current situation of the world, you say I drink all day, and the person's going to say, yeah, who doesn't?
Me too.
I actually get paid to do it, which is a bonus.
That's nice.
It's very nice, yes.
So sometimes if I'm doing a virtual tasting, sometimes they'll start at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning. Sometimes I join in during the tasting, sometimes I don't. At the end of the day, it depends on what kind of day you've had. So 12-year-old for me is easy breezy, just lovely. I've had it in delicious cocktails if I have the patience to make a cocktail at the end of the day. If I want something a little bit more maybe I just want one really nice whiskey,
Sure.
I'm more likely to reach for Aberlour 18-year-old. I
Oh,
don't drink it very often, but it's my personal favorite in the range. That is what I would describe as a dessert whiskey. It's
I want to say that a couple years ago, a friend of mine who owns a bar here in town was actually given, in the process of buying some other things for his bar, he got the 18-year-old, and he goes, "I don't like Scotch. Do you like Scotch?" Of course, I like Scotch. I haven't drank Scotch in a while, but he said, "Do you want this?" And I took it. So I have a vague, distant memory of how excellent that particular one was. And I have a friend who comes over and prefers Scotch, and he got to keep an eye on your friends, man. You got to keep an eye on your friends when they.
Yes, you do.
He emptied about half of that, and I'm like, it's an 18-year-old.
Like pay up.
Yeah.
That shit was like water, I bet.
Have one, and then switch over to one of the Glens that are ample and bountiful here in the house, but stay away from the 18. But yes, I have had the 18, and it is lovely. It is lovely. Let me ask you one more. Okay, you go first. You go first. You were saying.
It depends on the mood completely.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I don't drink 18 very often. It's kind of a special occasion. Like, I just want one whiskey, and I want a really lovely whiskey. But Alba has actually been my drink of choice recently because I'm in California at the moment. It's still quite hot. So I've been drinking A'Bunadh Alba in highballs with big, tall glass, lots of ice, good quality soda water, and a twist of grapefruit. And
Nice.
grapefruit really brings forward all of those stone fruits that are in the whiskey. Because it's cask strength as well, you're able to still feel like you're having a real drink without completely drowning your whiskey. So that's been my kind of go-to at the moment. Cask strength
Cocktail.
whiskey soda.
Yeah. We won't reveal our favorites till we're done with the third one before it's all said and done. But one more question before we get to the third one. And I made a note earlier when I don't know if it was Hansberry or Whitney that made a joke about, do the two sides oppose each other in Scotland in respects to the whiskeys. So do you ever get any grief being of Irish descent that you're not doing what you do so remarkably well this evening for an Irish whiskey company as opposed to Scotch?
Not really. No, I do get the question, not very frequently, but I've had it over the years. I've had it a number of times. Anyone of Irish origin tends to ask that question actually a lot. My response to that is always that we're cousins. The Irish and the Scottish are basically the same kind of people. We're Celtic origin. We have similar kind of humor. We have similar sort of upbringings.
Oppressed by England. Yeah.
Right. So much in common.
Okay.
Oppressed by England. Yeah.
Let's not go that deep.
You can actually see Scotland from Ireland.
Yeah.
Depending on where you're standing and if it's a clear day. There's only about 20 miles across the sea from one point of Ireland over to Scotland. So, I mean, I'm sure people have tried to swim it before. It's not that far. But we would definitely be closer in terms of our heritage and our culture. We'd be very close to each other than we would be to, say, Wales or England or anywhere else for that matter. We're very close to each other. So it's kind of like the Celtic side comes through.
Right.
And more importantly, you have to be a whiskey ambassador. You can't be a Scotch whiskey ambassador or an Irish whiskey ambassador. You have to be a whiskey ambassador. So if someone asks a question about Irish whiskey, but you only talk about Scotch whiskey, you're kind of going to look a little bit silly. So you need to kind of understand the categories as a whole. And I actually started off as an Irish whiskey ambassador, so that makes perfect sense, right?
And when in your career, when did you start drinking whiskey?
I don't know if I'm allowed to answer that question.
The wee age of 5.
Yeah, I come from an ethnic family where spirits were not prohibited. They were always in abundance in the home. So the mystique, if you will, was taken away from us at an early age. That, you know, what's the big deal? Have a drink, you know, have a sip of this, have a sip of that. So, but you know,
that was not my household.
That was not your household.
No one in my family drinks, really.
Oh wow!
Still,
that's not the first time I've heard that from people. We have a dear friend by the name of Barry Chandler who said his mother didn't drink and his father did, but then he stopped. We hear so many stories about people in these positions who come from families who, it was off the table.
It wasn't restricted as such. It wasn't like I didn't come from a super religious background or anything like that you weren't allowed to. I just didn't grow up with it. My mom didn't drink. Like neither of my grandparents. Actually, 3 out of 4 of my grandparents didn't drink.
Is that allowed in Ireland?
It's very common, actually.
Is that allowed to have that many members of family not drink?
I think it's strange, but more people that you speak to from Ireland, you'll find quite a lot of people actually don't drink. But because of that, I kind of grew up with, instead of it being like, oh, you can't have that, therefore you're going to go crazy when you do get it, right. I had more of a respect, if you will, for it, because I didn't have bad experiences either. I didn't see like the dark side that maybe other people might have experienced before. And because I grew up in a non-drinking household, it's not, you know, it's a different way. It's a different way. So sometimes my mom's like, what happened? What happened to my children? My brother and myself are big industry nerds, I would say. We love all kinds of spirits, but we appreciate them, and it's not about the alcohol. It's about the craft behind it and the stories behind it and the flavors that you can get from different regions. And it's a whole kind of like scientific approach, if you will, as opposed to like partying. That's how
long have you been in this world, in this industry, as far as employment is concerned?
Since ever that I can remember. I started my first job was not in whiskey, but my second job was in a bar. So like a lot of people, I would say most brand ambassadors would have started off in the drinks industry in general, either bartenders or servers, and I did that for a long time. And then I moved into the world of ambassadorship. So I think pretty much all of my working life, I've worked in the booze industry. I've been an ambassador for coming up on, I think it's like about 8.5 years at this stage.
Wow. Okay. Do what you love what you do, as we get to our third and final bottle of the night, because we're running out of a little bit of time, so I don't want to rush through this, but this is our third bottle. Tell us about our third bottle, if you would, Gemma.
So this is A'Bunadh. I like to refer to this whiskey as the fraternal twin of the last one that you just tasted. So it's similar in a lot of ways, but it's completely different. And any fraternal twins out there that are listening or watching will agree that you have similarities, but you're very, very different people. So A'Bunadh is similar in the sense that it's cask strength, it's non-chill filtered, it's batched just like Alba is batched as well. Every batch is going to be slightly different from the last one, and it's aged solely in one type of cask. So instead of where Alba was aged just in ex-bourbon barrels or American oak casks, A'Bunadh is aged in European oak casks that previously held Oloroso sherry. And you can see the color difference. I'll hold up both bottles side by side as well, so you can see the color difference on these.
I'll do that too. I'll do that too.
So why is that one so much darker?
because of the
Because of
cask
cask.
it's been aged in.
Yeah.
The cherry.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the light
Oh,
one
okay.
has been aged in ex-bourbon barrels, and the darker one has been aged in Oloroso sherry barrels. I mentioned at the beginning when we tasted the 12-year, the liquid that goes into those barrels is exactly the same. It's clear, high-proof liquid, new make spirit. One goes into a bourbon cask, one goes into an Oloroso sherry cask, and this is what comes out the other side.
The
after
same recipe,
fermentation.
just different ways of treating it after.
Exact
Okay.
same whiskey or whiskey
Juice.
recipe. So the new make spirit goes in is exactly the same. It's only the cask that's different. So you'll see there is a distillery style that you can pick up in both of these whiskeys, but the predominant flavors are going to come from the cask that it was actually aged in. One being bourbon, one being Oloroso sherry cask.
All right, I'm exaggerating. I'm doing this. I'm being somewhat flamboyant, but at the same time, it's an example of what I'm going to say. When this one first hit my nose, wow, this one had more nose than any of the other two for me. This one just wham,
Yeah.
Yeah,
hit me
absolutely.
hard. It hit me hard in the nose with an abundance of smells and flavors. And then this is also one that we should mention. This one is the bottle I have anyway. I don't know is this one is
Speyside.
59. It's not Speyside. 59.9. This is the highest proof whiskey of the evening.
Yeah,
that we
almost
have here.
120 proof.
Yeah, almost 120 proof.
And right up front, the nose is almost familiar to a bourbon. What
Yeah, exactly.
as opposed to the
And-
other ones.
And that you got a lot going on. Yeah.
That's true for sherry cask maturation, brings a lot of sweetness forward in a whiskey, but also quite a lot of spice. So spice meaning baking spices. Think of
Mhm.
nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon type spices.
All of
Thanksgiving.
those.
Sherry cask also
All of those.
through raisins and figs and all those sticky dried fruits.
All of them.
It's kind of like fall in a glass, right? It's a lot.
It is. It is. It's in the nose. It's also more predominantly in the palate, and a very nice long finish. A lot of warmth. I mean, this one This one warms back up again after you've let it go down there and sit for a second. It comes back up, and all those wonderful baking spices you mentioned and all those wonderful tastes
Thanksgiving smells.
start to come back up again.
And I wasn't sure about this one
way.
last night, man. I wasn't sure about this one
I was sure about this one
because I was like, I can't figure it out. That's why I wasn't sure about it.
more sweet.
I like it, though.
More sweet than spicy, in my opinion, and more malty than the others. I would have to say than the other two. A tad more malty.
Yeah, do you get a lot of chocolate off this one as well?
Yes, which I
And
love.
Kind of like orange zest comes through a lot. It depends on the batch that you're tasting, though. So
And raisin. You mentioned raisins. I get the raisins.
Yeah, raisins. All those lovely sticky dried fruits. Just it's beautiful. I also recommend this one with a little water as well. You'll probably have some listeners that will want to fight me over this because
we have friends that refuse to dilute. No matter the debate continues. This is in respects to Scotch, rye, bourbons. We've had the discussion about how a little bit of a drop of water or maybe one little small cube can open up the expressions of any given whiskey. But some refuse to adhere to anything. No, I like it neat. Okay, cowboy, you go ahead and deprive yourself of what might be an additional experience of said whiskey. You put a little bit of water in this one, which I just did, and much like a lot more that creaminess starts to come out in this one if you put a little bit of water.
You watch your glass as you add water to it. You can actually see the oils start to swirl around inside the glass. So for the people that don't like to add water, I always explain this. Like there's a chemical reaction happening inside your whiskey glass when you add some water to it. you're going to have a different experience. So just try it. You might not like it. You might still prefer it cask strength, but I like to describe it like playing a video game, right? So adding water is unlocking that next level that
Right.
you're going to get to if you.
It's a great way to describe it. It's a great way
It gets you to the big boss.
Yeah. So it's obviously going to lessen the alcohol that you get, but that in turn means that you're physically able to pick up more of those kind of lighter, more floral notes coming through than you would when it's a cask strength. It's a little tight when it's a cask strength.
All right. Well, as we start to wrap things up here, I hope you remember this, Johnny, because I don't want to make it sound like I'm sucking up the teacher tonight with Gemma when I pick my favorite. But out of the three, gentlemen, what was your favorite? I'll go first. I will say that number 2 was my favorite of the evening, only because, and you mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned pouring it into a tall glass with a little bit of soda and a little bit of grapefruit. This is something that I could enjoy at any given time of the day if I wanted a Scotch whiskey. And it's the one that and maybe I liked it best because it caught me off guard, because I didn't pick up a lot as much as I thought in the nose, but in the palate and in the finish and in the overall enjoyment of it all. And then pleasantly surprised that, this is new to the family as well. Mm-hmm. So that kind of is encouraging also, in a way that, the steps and the strides that you're taking, because I know that the company has made a very firm stand and commitment to saying, like, we deserve to be up there with all the ones that have enjoyed the prominence in the Scotch world. And I think you're well on your way. That's my daughter in the background with the cats. Yeah, it's all right. That's okay.
I thought it was a ghost.
That's my daughter in the background with her cats. Sorry. That's okay. You're right.
Pour a glass of scotch and
yeah. It's, but yeah. So number two, the Alba was my favorite of the night. Johnny, yours?
Well, my favorites are in order of how we tasted them. I really like the 80 proof, only because it just felt really natural to me going down, and it would be something that I would sit and just sip, because I like to sip whiskeys, And so this one, the fruitiness I love, and it felt like home, Dino.
Can I ask you a question, Johnny?
Like
Can I ask you a question? Something that Gemma mentioned earlier in the podcast, and I'll come back to it. You had a tasting last night, and then now. Was there anything? Did you pick up on anything different, or as opposed to the second time around?
Not on the 80 proof, but on the middle one, the Alba.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, is that the Albi? The Alba is the second one, right?
Alba was the second one. Yeah.
That one I definitely picked up on more stuff, more of some of the notes that Gemma was talking about, and I like that one actually better than I did last night.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think the third one is still my third place. But I kind of step back from the hotter ones, the ones that are higher proof.
See, I like stuff that fights me a little bit, and I like it a little bit. But I applaud all three of them, because I know, as a lot of my friends are I don't want to say hard drinkers, but they are consistent drinkers. So I'm thrilled that, especially in the Scotch world, that I can say, okay, you know what? I've got a Scotch for each of you. One that likes it to bite and fight a little bit, one that wants to sit back on the porch and just enjoy, and one who said, like, it's been a long time since I've had Scotch. Yeah. What do you got for me that might ease me back into that world? So you've done an excellent job, Gemma, of giving us 3 Scotch whiskeys that cover all those bases. Hansberry, you didn't get the taste last night, so what was your favorite?
I'd say go big or go home. The third, the A'Bunadh. Yeah.
What'd you call it?
Go big or the A'Bunadh. I don't know. Is that how you? What is it?
Nope.
What?
Wrong.
What is it?
He hasn't even been listening the whole
No, I was trying to be smart.
He is the youngest. He is the youngest. In his defense, Gemma, where he started on this podcast, as far as his initiation into the whiskey world, and where he's come, is just huge. So
These are from Ireland, right?
To throw him into
He's from Ireland.
to throw him into the Scotch world uninitiated, it's he gets
All right, how do you
he
pronounce
gets the
it? How do you
pass.
pronounce the third one?
A'Bunadh. And you know what? We're in a
Close enough.
A'Bunadh.
A'Bunadh.
Oh, good, A'Bunadh.
A'Bunadh. Yeah.
Well, the A'Bunadh is my favorite.
What's your favorite? Considering you're not necessarily a big Scotch whiskey drinker, because it is a big, spicy, robust whiskey. So it's good to know.
Yeah, it's good that he's drinking it at home too, because if we were all here together like a normal podcast, if you were actually able to join us here in the house where I'm at, is where we normally record the podcast. Because of everything that's going on in the world, we've been I don't want to say reduced, but forced to do it like this. If he was here, there'd be a bigger dent in that bottle that he liked so much before.
Much heavier. 120 proof.
Yeah,
Hefty.
and he'd be knocking out another bush in the driveway.
A young 62.
I get no respect here, Gemma. Come on.
You get all the respect in the world. All the respect in the world. Gemma, we gotta start wrapping things up. I want to thank you sincerely. I want to thank everybody that was so wonderfully patient and consistent over at Avalor for putting this together. Thank you for finding the time. I know you have to move on and do other things yet before your day is out, because it's still you're still early and you still have things to do and places to be. But thank you so much for being delightfully informative and entertaining and educational. And thank you for being a part of getting these 3 wonderful bottles to my home as well. We wish you well in your Scotch journeys moving on down the line. And I think that if this is the future moving forward, I think your future looks very bright.
I hope so. I think you're right. Aberlour's doing an amazing job. So hopefully we can keep it up and keep introducing new people to this delightful whiskey. Thank you guys for having me as well.
I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. I told you earlier in an email that we do not consider ourselves to be whiskey experts, but we do consider ourselves to be whiskey enthusiasts, and welcome the opportunity to learn and engage and share. And I think we've done a really good job of that tonight, especially for those who were like, yeah, I was thinking about going back to Scotch. I wonder what they got to say. I think we did a good job of that this evening. Hansberry, before we go, a little bit of business that you didn't get to do in the beginning that you should do before we close.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for checking out Whiskey Business, or I guess today Scotchy Business.
It's still whiskey, my friend. It's still whiskey.
That's true. That's very true. Subscribe and rate and review on your favorite podcasting app, whatever that is. We're on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, Amazon, Audible, all of them now. Let's see. Check out whiskeybusinesspod.com. You can see it here if you are watching on the YouTube channel, where we've got archives and blogs and that kind of stuff that you like to check out. Also, if you're listening to this podcast, we do videotape these, and we had a lot of great visuals with the bottles, and we're talking about the different colors and things like that. YouTube, Whiskey Business with Dino Tripodis. Click the subscribe and the little bell notification icon right there, and you'll get updates every time we post something new. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's it. Thanks. Share with all your friends, especially if you've had like Scotch loving friends that who haven't been interested. We're broadening our horizons, baby.
Have you learned a lot tonight, Hansberry?
I have.
Do you consider yourself to have gotten a tutorial, a little bit more of an education? Have we have we advanced? Have we raised the bar in your whiskey education? Because this is an education that's been going on for 4 years.
I can't wait to.
I feel like now you're in graduate school.
This is nice. I'm going to have a nice hefty pour on the Spey River with my Celtic brethren.
I learned a lot because I really haven't had Scotch since I was 10 years old, and you know that story.
Yeah, well, you know what? Before we go, share that story with Gemma.
So my mom liked Scotch, and I actually stole some out of her bottle, and I didn't understand what I was drinking, really. I didn't know I was going to get drunk. So I got on my bike, and I went to an ice cream store and got the biggest sundae you could get with like 12 scoops. They call it the Matterhorn. And I puked all the way home. It was a fun time.
What? I don't know which one I'm more horrified about, the 12 scoop ice cream or the whiskey at 10 years old.
Yeah. They knew I was drunk when I walked in, I think. I think they just kind of were like, yeah.
The reason I asked him to tell that story is because you were so hesitant to say when you started, getting into the spirit world. You seem reluctant. After hearing the 10-year-old on the bicycle story, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I think you're good.
No.
I think you're good. Gemma,
I never had it before. After that,
I bet you never for a long time.
Until
Gemma
tonight.
Cole, thank you so much, and we look forward to hopefully people embracing these 3 whiskeys that we tried tonight. And moving forward, if there's anything that we can do with you guys come out with something different and exciting that you want to share, we're here for you. We would love to be a part of it as we were this evening. So thank you so much. Continued success with everything that you're doing. Be safe and stay healthy. And we appreciate you being with us. Whiskey Business, my friends, is a Never the Luck production, produced on remarkably sometimes, when I think about it, produced on the video side by the amazing John Whitney, who had Scotch for the first time when he was 10 years old.
I know.
and remarkably on the audio side, who from Greg Hansberry, who knew nothing about the Scotch before tonight. And I blame myself, Hansberry. I blame myself for not giving you a formal education before this evening. So I take it out.
We're all right. Thank you, sir.
And the lovely Gemma Cole as well for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
As we always close each and every podcast, my friends, until the next bottle, or in tonight's case, bottles, see ya.